So Facebook is doing something new and different. So I'm trying to figure out how to make this work. So apparently we're going to do a horizontal screen. Oh. Alright. I don't know if this is going to work, but because this is new, so I haven't had a chance to figure out whether this is the same. Yeah, I guess so. It says live. So I don't know if anybody saw this morning the post that I did this morning, where I read most of Genesis 19, where we got I got down to like verse 30, and then I got a phone call, and I had to end what I was doing in order to get the phone call. And I've spent the last 2 days having so much trouble getting this accomplished that I thought maybe I'm being slowed down on purpose. So the thing that was bothering me about this particular part of Scripture had to do with that business about Lot offering his 2 daughters to the people that were outside trying to get to the angels. So I poked around a lot today on the internet, commentary, looking at different people's opinions, and I found this one that I'm going to read because I thought, oh, this makes a great deal of sense. The other thing that I did is I went to YouTube, which is kind of cheating, because it's other people reading to you instead of reading it yourself. There's 3 major apocryphal texts, books that are not in your standard Bible, but they are actually mentioned in the Bible. Obviously, the book of Enoch, Jasher, and Jubilees. Jasher is mentioned like 3 times. Is it not written in the book of Jasher? I remember seeing that line in the Bible a couple of years ago. I wanted to do something here. There we go. And thinking, where's the book of Jasher? So, anyway, I found it, and as I have wandered off into fringe Christianity, I've located the book of Jasher. And the reason I went there is because I know that this story of Sodom and Gomorrah gets covered in the book of Jasher. I'm like, let me listen to this again. And there was some serious cruelty that was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah, but none of it was that I could see was sexual. It was more like strangers would come into town and they would take them captive and starve them to death. It really had a lot more to do with what do they call that? Xenophobia, fear of strangers, than it did any kind of sexual thing. So here's this commentary that I found. I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. So what follows is a reading. I'm reading their commentary. What follows is a reading of the Sodom narrative based on the commentary of Nachmanides, which is drastically different from the way this story is commonly understood. No other reading of this story makes sense to me. The progression of events. The people of Sodom gather outside Lot's house and they make a request. The original Hebrew is highly ambiguous here. Verse 5, and they called unto Lot and said to him, where are the men that came into thee this night? Bring them out to us, that we may know them. In both English and Hebrew, the word know can be understood here in a cognitive or sexual sense. Lot responds to this request by offering the people of Sodom his 2 daughters. Do to them as is good in your eyes. The townspeople are infuriated by Lot's offer, and they respond, quote, this one fellow, Lot, came in to sojourn, and he will needs play the judge. Now we will deal worse with thee than with them. The implications, it's clear from their response that the townspeople have no interest in Lot's daughters, and that the offer was highly offensive to them. In my opinion, the Sodomites wanted to expel Lot's visitors from the city for any number of social/economic reasons, and their justification that we may know them is a thinly veiled threat, like saying, we just want to talk. That we may know them also serves to highlight that these people are outsiders of the town that no one knows. Of course, Lot understands the intentions of the mob, and so he mocks them for their cruelty by intentionally misunderstanding their previous statement to suggest that the people want to engage in gang rape and sodomy. In verse 7, it says, and he said, I pray you, my brethren, do not do so wickedly. Behold, now I have 2 daughters that have not known a man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out to you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Lot would never give over his daughters to the people of Sodom, and he understands that these people have no interest in his daughters. Lot's offer is meant to be offensive, and indeed the people of the town immediately recognize that they are being criticized. This one fellow came into sojourn, and he needs to play the judge? He's judging us? This attack by Lot on standard immigration procedure in Sodom makes him the target of their rage in the same way that the illegal aliens were the target just a few verses earlier. Now we will deal worse with thee than with them. The sin of Sodom matters because the later prophets regularly compare the nation of Israel to Sodom. In Isaiah 1, verses 9 and 10, Isaiah 3, verse 9, Jeremiah 23:14, Ezekiel 16, verses 41 to 56, and more. If the sin of Sodom was sodomy, then this comparison seems hyperbolic and inconsistent with all the common themes in the later prophets. However, if the sin of Sodom was xenophobia, insularity, and a lack of social justice, then this criticism is perfectly consistent with the messages that permeate the prophetic writings from that time. So, bottom line is this. Lot had no intention of giving his daughters over to the people of Sodom, and their original request to Lot had nothing to do with sex. So, I feel so much better having discovered that, because it really does make more sense. When Lot offers his daughters, the reaction of the people is, oh, you're judging us? What? That would not be the reaction if they just rejected the females, you know? So, and on that note, I'm going to finish reading Genesis 19, starting with verse 30, where we wander off into other weird stuff. Then Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountains, and his 2 daughters were with him. For he was afraid to dwell in Zoar, and he and his 2 daughters dwelt in a cave. Now the firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old, and there is no man on the earth to come into us, as is the custom of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father. So they made their father drink wine that night. The firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. It happened on the next day that the firstborn said to the younger, Indeed, I lay with my father last night. Let us make him drink wine tonight also, and you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father. Then they made their father drink wine that night also, and the younger arose and lay with him. And he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Thus both the daughters of Lot were with child by their father. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. And the younger, she also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami. He is the father of the people of Ammon to this day. And that's the end of chapter 19. All right, so the weirdness, obviously. Now we're dealing with incest. But in defense of these girls, who, by the way, were teenage girls. I mean, they got married pretty young back then. And they still had not gotten married. So you're probably talking about like a 13 and 14-year-old girls. And it was, I did the math on this. It was about 400 to 500 years earlier, which is not that long in the grand history of things. 427 years earlier than this happening with them and their father was the flood, where God destroyed the entire world with water, and then he promised that he wasn't going to do it again with water, next time fire. So here are these girls, these two girls, and their father. They have just lived through the entire world that they can see being like blown up. Fire and brimstone raining from the sky. There was that promise. As far as they were concerned, the world had been destroyed by fire, just like they had been told was going to happen, because the world was, evil. Little did they know that they weren't alone. They thought they were alone. So, it's like, well, we are now responsible for repopulating the world, and the only guy here is Dad. So that's what was going on there. It's kind of creepy, but what do you do, So I guess that's it for tonight. Right, so basically, everybody's related. Everybody's related to everybody else. You have to remember that we all go back to Noah, Everybody's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather is Noah. We're all related. So I'm going to call it, a night with chapter 19, and I will try again tomorrow to do chapter 20. There is a cross-reference, and I want to look at this pretty closely, because there's a reference here to Deuteronomy 23:3, which is confusing. It's also complicated. Like, I went and had to look at this thing with Lot and his daughters being offered to the townspeople. It's difficult to get your head around. Deuteronomy 23:3 says, where are you? When the Israelites came out of Egypt, the Moabites, I was going to say, it'll actually say it here, an Ammonite or Moabite, those are descendants of those two kids, shall not enter the assembly of the Lord, even to the 10th generation. None of his descendants shall enter the assembly of the Lord forever, because they did not meet you with bread and water on the road when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam the son of Beor from Pethor of Mesopotamia to curse you. The reason that is confusing is because when you get to the book of Ruth, Ruth is a Moabite. And Ruth gives birth to Obed, and Obed gives birth to, begets Jesse, and Jesse is King David's father. That's only 3 generations, and now he's the king of Israel. So how did the Moabite, Ruth, and I'm going to have to think about this. So, well, this becomes more and more complicated as we move forward. Anyway, thanks for listening. I'll talk to you tomorrow.